The Johnson family was a tight-knit bunch, always sticking together no matter what. The dad had worked hard his entire life to build a successful career in the airline industry, eventually becoming the CEO of one of the biggest airlines in the high world. Despite all the success, he made sure his kids stayed humble and never forgot where they came from. His two teenagers, a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, were smart, kind-hearted, and full of energy. They weren't spoiled by their dad's wealth. Instead, they admired him for how far he'd come through sheer determination. One weekend, the siblings were set to fly alone for the first time. Their parents decided it would be a fun adventure for them to visit their grandparents in Miami. To make the trip extra special, their dad booked them VIP lounge access and first-class tickets. "You've earned this," he told them with a proud smile before dropping them off at the airport. "Take lots of pictures and enjoy yourselves." The morning of the flight, the brother and sister arrived at the terminal buzzing with excitement. This wasn't just any trip. It felt like stepping into a whole new world. As they checked in, the staff greeted them warmly, handing over their boarding passes and pointing them toward the exclusive VIP lounge. Inside, the atmosphere was calm and luxurious with soft couches, gourmet snacks, and big windows overlooking the runway. For a while, they sat there sipping fruit juice and watching planes take off, feeling like royalty. When it was finally time to board, the siblings walked down the jet bridge with wide eyes. First class lived up to every expectation. The seats were plush leather, almost like mini beds with plenty of space to stretch out. There were cozy blankets, noise-canceling headphones, and even personalized welcome notes on each seat. The brother couldn't help but grin as he settled into his spot. "This is insane," he whispered to his sister. "We're living large today." But just as they were getting comfortable, something unexpected happened. A flight attendant approached them with a clipboard in hand. She gave them a quick once-over before speaking in a clipped tone. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm but not exactly friendly. "These seats have been reserved for other passengers. I'll need you both to move." The brother blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "These are our assigned seats. We showed our boarding passes when we got on." The attendant hesitated for a moment, then repeated herself. "I'm sorry, but there's been a mix-up. Please gather your things and follow me." Still unsure of what was happening, the siblings reluctantly grabbed their bags and followed her down the narrow aisle. Whispers started to ripple through the cabin as they passed. Some passengers looked sympathetic, shaking their heads or offering small smiles. Others seemed amused, leaning over to whisper to their seatmates. By the time they reached the back of the plane, the brother noticed something strange. The people who were supposedly supposed to sit in their original spots were already seated elsewhere in economy class. "This doesn't add up," the brother muttered under his breath, glancing at his sister. Her face was red and tears were welling up in her eyes. "They didn't want us there because we're black," she replied quietly, her voice trembling with anger. "That's the only reason." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of the situation hit them like a ton of bricks. All the excitement they'd felt earlier was replaced by frustration and disbelief. How could something like this happen? They hadn't done anything wrong. They were just two kids trying to enjoy a special treat from their parents. But now, sitting in cramped middle seats near the noisy engines, they couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been treated unfairly. And deep down, they knew they deserved better. As the plane taxied down the runway, the brother tried to keep his cool, but it was hard. He could see the disappointment on his sister's face, and it made him angry. How dare someone treat them like they didn't belong? They weren't causing trouble or being rude. They were just sitting in the seats they had paid for. The unfairness of it all gnawed at him. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, nudging her gently. She shook her head, wiping away a tear. "No. I don't understand why this happened. We did everything right." He wanted to say something comforting, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he pulled out his phone. Maybe calling their dad would help. Not because he expected him to fix things right then and there, but because talking to him always made them feel better. Their dad wasn't just successful, he was wise, supportive, and fiercely protective of his family. If anyone could help them process what had happened, it was him. Back home, their dad was wrapping up a meeting when his phone buzzed. Seeing it was his son calling, he picked up immediately. "Hey, champ, how's the flight going?" The boy hesitated for a second, unsure of how to start. Then he took a deep breath and began explaining what had happened. His voice wavered as he described the flight attendant's request, the walk down the aisle, and the whispers from other passengers. His sister chimed in too, her frustration bubbling over. "Dad, it wasn't fair," she said, her tone sharp with emotion. "They singled us out because of how we look." Their dad listened silently, his jaw tightening with each word. He felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and guilt for not being there to protect them. But more than anything, he felt pride. His kids were handling this situation with courage, even though it clearly hurt. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "Let me handle this. Just sit tight, okay? I'll take care of it." The siblings nodded even though he couldn't see them. Ending the call gave them a small sense of relief. Knowing their dad was on their side meant everything. Still, they couldn't shake the unease settling in their chests. What would happen next? Would anyone even believe them? Meanwhile, their dad wasted no time. As soon as he hung up, he called his assistant. "Get me the head of operations," he said sharply. "Now." While waiting, he paced his office, replaying the conversation in his mind. It wasn't just about his kids. It was about the bigger picture. He'd worked tirelessly to build an airline that stood for inclusivity and respect. Yet here was evidence that some employees still held biases, treating people differently based on the color of their skin. That wasn't just unacceptable, it was heartbreaking. When the head of operations finally got on the line, the dad cut straight to the point. "Tell me what happened on Flight 427, he demanded. "Why were my children asked to give up their seats?" The operations manager stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Sir, I'm not sure. Let me look into it and get back to you." "No," the dad interrupted, his voice icy. "You're going to look into it now, and while you're at it, find out if this has happened before. I want answers and I want them fast." The manager scrambled to comply, promising updates within the hour. But the dad wasn't satisfied. He knew how these situations often played out. Employees covering for each other, shifting blame, or brushing things under the rug. Not this time. This time he was determined to get to the truth. Word of the incident spread quickly among the airline staff. Social media lit up almost instantly after one passenger posted about the scene on the plane. Videos surfaced showing the flight attendant's dismissive attitude and the siblings' visible discomfort as they moved to economy class. Comments poured in from all sides, some defending the crew, others calling for accountability. The story blew up, trending online within hours. By the time the siblings landed in Miami, reporters were already waiting at the gate. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust toward them as they stepped off the plane. Their grandparents rushed to shield them, ushering them away from the chaos. Inside the car, their grandma hugged them tightly. "Don't worry, babies," she said soothingly. "We'll figure this out together." But outside, the world was buzzing. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as yet another example of racial bias in everyday life. People shared their own experiences of discrimination while traveling, flooding comment sections and forums with personal accounts. Hashtags like "You stand with the kids" and "travel equality" began trending worldwide. Through it all, the dad remained focused. He reviewed the investigation findings as soon as they came in. The report revealed troubling patterns, not just isolated incidents involving his children, but a history of discriminatory behavior by certain members of the crew. Some employees had received complaints in the past for similar actions but faced no consequences. Others admitted to making assumptions about passengers based on appearance or race. Reading the details made the dad's blood boil. These weren't harmless mistakes. They were systemic issues that needed to be addressed. And he knew exactly where to start. That evening, he gathered his leadership team for an emergency meeting. "This stops now," he declared, slamming a folder onto the table. "We're firing everyone involved. The flight attendant, the gate agent, the supervisor, no exceptions. and we're implementing new policies to ensure this never happens. Again, his team nodded, knowing better than to argue. When the dad spoke like that, you listened, because beneath his calm exterior was a man who didn't tolerate injustice and who always followed through on his promises. For the siblings, the day had been exhausting. Back at their grandparents' house, they sat quietly on the couch, scrolling. Through their phones, notifications kept pinging one after another. Friends, classmates, and even strangers were reaching. The dad didn't waste a single moment. After the emergency meeting with his leadership team, he made it clear that this wasn't just about his kids, it was about setting an example. He wanted everyone in the company to understand that discrimination wouldn't be tolerated no matter who was involved. The message was simple. If you work for this airline, you treat every passenger with respect. No excuses, no exceptions. But firing the crew wasn't enough for him. He knew actions spoke louder than words, so he decided to address the public directly. That evening, he sat down at his desk and typed out a tweet. It wasn't long or complicated, just a few sentences, but it carried the weight of a father's love and a leader's responsibility. My children deserve respect like any other passenger. Discrimination has no place in my airline or anywhere else. Within minutes, the post went viral. People from all over the world shared it, praising him for standing up for his family while also acknowledging the bigger issue at hand. Social media exploded with hashtags like fairness in flight, and racial bias. Some users posted stories of their own experiences with discrimination on flights, while others thanked him for using his position to make a change. By morning, the story had reached national news. Talk shows, radio hosts, and journalists were discussing it nonstop. Reporters camped outside the airline's headquarters, eager to get a statement. Employees whispered nervously in break rooms, wondering how far-reaching the consequences would be. Passengers who had witnessed the incident chimed in too, sharing videos and recounting what they saw. One elderly woman, seated near the siblings, told reporters, "It broke my heart to watch those kids being treated that way. They didn't deserve it." Amid the chaos, the dad remained calm, but resolute. He called another meeting with his executive team, this time to discuss long-term solutions. "Firing people is just the first step," he said firmly. "We need to fix the system. This isn't just about one bad decision, it's about patterns we've ignored for too long." His team nodded, jotting down notes. They proposed mandatory diversity training for all employees, stricter accountability measures, and anonymous reporting channels for passengers to share concerns without fear of retaliation. The dad agreed with every suggestion, but pushed for more. "Let's go beyond training," he said. "I want posters in every airport lounge reminding staff and passengers alike that racism won't be tolerated. Let's create campaigns celebrating diversity. We're not just fixing a problem, we're building a culture." As the day wore on, the siblings tried their best to stay out of the spotlight. Their grandparents kept the curtains drawn and the front door locked to keep reporters away. Inside, the house buzzed with quiet conversations. Friends and relatives called constantly, offering support and checking in. Their grandma cooked comfort food, fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, to lift their spirits. "You two, focus on resting," she said, patting her grandson's shoulder. "Leave the rest to your dad." Despite the warmth and care around them, the siblings couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every notification on their phones brought another comment, another message, another opinion. At first, it was overwhelming. But as they scrolled through the flood of responses, they noticed something powerful. They weren't alone. Thousands of people were speaking up, sharing their own stories of facing bias and discrimination. Strangers sent messages of encouragement, telling them to stay strong and keep fighting. One message stood out to the sister. A young girl, probably around her age, wrote, "I'm so proud of you for standing up. You're making the world better for people like me." Reading those words made her chest swell with pride. For the first time since the flight, she felt like maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of this mess. That night, their dad called to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. "We're okay," the brother replied, glancing at his sister. "People are really supportive, it helps." Their dad sighed, relief evident in his tone. "I'm glad to hear that. Listen, I know this hasn't been easy, but I want you to remember something. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And because of how you're handling it, we have a chance to make things better. Not just for us, but for everyone." The sister smiled faintly. "Do you think people will actually listen?" "I know they will," their dad answered confidently. "Because you're giving them a reason to. You're showing courage, and people notice that." After hanging up, the siblings sat quietly for a while, thinking about what their dad had said. Courage. It was a big word, but somehow it fit. They hadn't planned to become symbols of resilience or advocates for change, but here they were. And even though it scared them a little, it also gave them hope. Their grandpa walked in, carrying a tray of hot chocolate. "Here," he said, handing them each a mug. "Drink up, then tell me what you're thinking." The brother took a sip before answering. I think we should say something, like publicly. People are listening right now. Maybe we can use that to help others." The sister nodded, her earlier determination returning. "Yeah, if someone hears our story and feels less alone, then this whole thing might actually mean something." Their grandpa grinned, clearly proud. "That's the spirit. Sometimes life throws you curveballs, but it's how you swing that matters." And with that, the siblings began to plan. They didn't know exactly what they'd say yet, but they knew they wanted their voices to be heard. Not for fame or attention, but because they believed in fairness, and because they refused to let anyone else feel the way they did on that plane. The next morning, the siblings woke up with a mix of emotions swirling inside them. There was still a lingering sadness from what had happened on the plane, but there was also a growing sense of purpose. They'd spent most of the night talking to their grandparents about how they could turn this painful experience into something meaningful. By the time the sun peeked through the curtains, they had made up their minds. They weren't going to stay silent. Their dad called early that day, his voice full of pride when they told him their decision. "I'll support you every step of the way," he assured them. "But remember, it's your story. You tell it however you want." With that encouragement, the siblings started preparing. They knew speaking publicly wouldn't be easy. It meant facing criticism, judgment, and maybe even more negativity. But they felt ready. Their grandma helped them write down key points they wanted to share, while their grandpa filmed practice runs on his phone so they could see how they came across. "You're naturals," he said after one take, giving them a thumbs up. "Just speak from the heart." Meanwhile, the airline was buzzing with activity. The firings of the flight attendant, gate agent, and supervising manager sent shockwaves through the company. Some employees defended the crew, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Others whispered among themselves, admitting they'd seen similar incidents happen before but never thought anyone would actually do anything about it. A few even confessed to feeling relieved that the truth was finally coming out. At a press conference later that afternoon, the dad stood in front of a room packed with reporters, cameras flashing like strobe lights. He looked calm and composed, dressed in a sharp suit, but everyone could see the fire in his eyes. Beside him sat the siblings, holding hands tightly under the table. They were nervous, more nervous than they'd ever been, but they reminded themselves why they were there. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what they did. When it was time for the dad to speak, he began by thanking the public for their overwhelming support. "This past week has been difficult for my family," he said, his voice steady but warm. "But it's also shown us the power of standing together. My children deserve respect just like anyone else. And if we can use this moment to create change, then it will have been worth it." Then he turned to the siblings, nodding gently. They wanted to say a few words too. The brother cleared his throat and stood up, gripping the microphone with both hands. His palms were sweaty, but he forced himself to look at the crowd. "Hi," he started, his voice soft but clear. "We didn't plan for any of this to happen. We were just two kids excited to visit our grandparents. But when we got on that plane, we realized something wasn't right. We were asked to give up our seats not because of a mistake but because of how we look. He paused, taking a deep breath. The room was completely silent except for the faint hum of camera shutters. It hurt. It made us feel like we didn't belong. But we're here today because we know we're not the only ones who felt this way. So many people have shared their stories with us, and we want them to know they're not alone. The sister took over, her voice trembling slightly but strong enough to carry. What happened to us shouldn't happen to anyone. Ever. We're telling our story because we hope it makes people think twice about how they treat others. Just because someone looks different doesn't mean they deserve less respect. She glanced at her brother, who gave her an encouraging nod. Our dad always taught us to stand up for what's right, and that's what we're doing now. We're standing up. For ourselves, for our family, and for everyone who's been treated unfairly. The room erupted into applause. Reporters shouted questions, but the dad held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "Thank you," he said, smiling. The days following the press conference felt like a whirlwind. The siblings were suddenly thrust into the spotlight, their faces appearing on morning talk shows, news segments, and even magazine covers. At first, it was overwhelming. Everywhere they went, people recognized them, whether it was at the grocery store with their grandma or walking through the airport on their way back home. Strangers stopped them to shake their hands, share their own stories, or simply say, "Thank you." One woman approached them in the food court of a mall, tears streaming down her face. "I've been scared to fly ever since someone treated me the same way," she confessed. "But hearing you speak out makes me feel like maybe things can change." Her words stuck with the siblings long after she left. It wasn't just about their story anymore. It was about all the other voices that had stayed silent until now. Back at school, things were different too. When the brother walked into class, his friends greeted him with applause. "Dude, you're a legend," one of them said, clapping him on the back. Teachers invited him and his sister to give presentations during assemblies, where they spoke to hundreds of students about standing up against injustice. Their message was simple: if something doesn't feel right, don't stay quiet. Speak up, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Their dad kept busy as well. He announced the launch of a new foundation aimed at tackling racial bias in travel and hospitality industries. Within days, donations poured in from celebrities, corporate leaders, and ordinary people who wanted to help. The funds would go toward scholarships for underprivileged youth, diversity training programs for employees, and advocacy campaigns to raise awareness about discrimination. But what really surprised the siblings was how many companies reached out wanting to partner with the foundation. Airlines, hotels, car rental services, all of them eager to improve their policies and prove they cared about equality. Some sent representatives to meet with their dad, asking for advice on how to create safer spaces for minority travelers. Others pledged money and resources to support the cause. It was clear that their story had struck a nerve, not just with the public but with businesses too. Despite all the attention, life didn't slow down for the siblings. Between interviews, speeches, and planning sessions for the foundation, they still had homework to finish, chores to do, and basketball games to play. Their grandparents joked that they needed to hire an assistant just to keep track of everything. "You two are busier than your dad," their grandpa teased one evening over dinner. Through it all, the siblings leaned on each other and their family for strength. Their parents reminded them daily not to lose sight of who they were. "Stay grounded," their mom told them firmly, one night. "Just because people are cheering you on doesn't mean you should forget where you came from." Their dad echoed that sentiment. "This movement isn't about fame or recognition," he said during one of their late-night strategy meetings. "It's about fairness. Remember that no matter what happens." By the end of the month, the airline itself began to transform. New posters appeared in terminals across the country, featuring bold messages like, "Respect is non-negotiable," and "Everyone belongs here." Flight attendants wore pins that read, "Equality takes off with us," while gate agents handed out cards encouraging passengers to report any unfair treatment. Employees attended mandatory diversity workshops designed to challenge stereotypes. and promote inclusivity. Slowly but surely, the culture within the airline started to shift. Passengers noticed the difference almost immediately. Social media lit up again, this time with positive reviews. One frequent flyer posted a video of a flight attendant going out of her way to assist an elderly passenger with mobility issues. "This is what flying should feel like," the caption read. Another traveler shared a photo of a handwritten note left on their seat. "Thank you for choosing us. We're committed to making every journey better than the last." For the siblings, seeing these changes unfold was incredibly rewarding. They hadn't expected their actions to spark such widespread reform, but here it was, a tangible impact, rippling far beyond their initial expectations. Still, they knew there was more work to be done. Discrimination wasn't something that could be erased overnight. It would take time, effort, and constant vigilance to ensure progress continued. One weekend, the entire family gathered around the dining table for a rare quiet moment together. Their grandma brought out her famous peach cobbler, setting it in the center of the table with a flourish. "All right, spill it," she said, pointing her spoon at the siblings. "What's next for you two?" The brother shrugged, grabbing a slice of dessert. "Honestly, I'm not sure, but whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." His sister nodded, smiling softly. "Yeah, we've already come so far. I think we're ready for whatever comes next." Their dad leaned back in his chair, watching them with pride. "That's the spirit," he said, raising his glass. "To courage, resilience, and a brighter future." As they clinked glasses, laughter filling the room, the siblings realized something important. This journey had changed them. It had tested their strength, pushed them out of their comfort zones, and shown them the power of using their voices for good. But more than anything, it had reminded them of the importance of family, community, and standing up for what's right. And though the road ahead might still hold challenges, they faced it with hope. Because sometimes, the smallest act of bravery can ignite the biggest change. As weeks turned into months, the siblings began to settle into their new reality. Life wasn't exactly back to normal. It was hard to call it normal when strangers still stopped them in malls or sent messages of gratitude online, but they found a rhythm that worked. They learned how to balance being advocates with just being kids. Homework and basketball practice became as much a part of their routine as interviews and speeches. Their parents made sure they stayed grounded, reminding them often that no amount of attention should change who they were. Their dad continued leading the charge at the airline, pushing for reforms that went beyond surface-level fixes. He knew real change took time, so he focused on creating systems that would last long after the headlines faded. Employee feedback forms were updated to include questions about bias and fairness. Anonymous hotlines were set up for passengers to report issues without fear of backlash. Even the hiring process was revamped, ensuring diverse candidates had equal opportunities to join the team. But perhaps the most impactful initiative was the mentorship program the foundation launched. It paired young people from underserved communities with professionals in the travel industry, pilots, flight attendants, engineers, and executives who could offer guidance and support. The siblings loved this idea because it gave others a chance to dream bigger. "Imagine if someone had told us when we were little that we could grow up to be anything we wanted," the sister said during one of their talks. "That's what we're doing for these kids," the brother nodded, adding, "And it's not just about jobs, it's about showing them they belong no matter where they come from." The program quickly gained traction, with hundreds of mentors signing up within the first few weeks. Stories poured in from participants about how the experience transformed their outlook. One teenager, inspired by a pilot mentor, decided to pursue aviation school. Another girl, mentored by a flight attendant, discovered a passion for hospitality management. Every success story fueled the siblings' determination to keep going. Meanwhile, the airline itself became a model for other companies looking to improve diversity and inclusion. Executives from rival airlines visited headquarters to learn about the reforms, while industry conferences invited the dad to speak about his journey. At one event, he stood before a packed auditorium and shared a lesson he'd learned along the way. Change starts with listening. If you truly hear what your employees and customers are saying, you'll know exactly where to begin. Of course, not everyone was happy about the changes. Some critics accused the airline of overreacting, claiming the firings were too harsh or the new policies unnecessary. A few disgruntled former employees even filed lawsuits, though none of them gained much traction. The dad shrugged off the negativity, focusing instead on the overwhelming support from passengers and staff alike. If we lose a handful of people who don't believe in equality, he told his leadership team, then good riddance. We're building something better here. For the siblings, the highlight of this period came during a special ceremony hosted by the foundation. Hundreds of people gathered at a community center to celebrate the launch of a scholarship fund aimed at helping minority students pursue careers in aviation. The room buzzed with excitement as families mingled, sharing stories and dreams for the future. When the brother and sister stepped onto the stage to present the first round of awards, the crowd erupted into applause. "Thank you all for being here today," the sister began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "This scholarship is more than just money, it's a promise. A promise that your dreams matter, your voices matter, and your presence matters." Her brother picked up where she left off. "We started this journey because we wanted to make flying fairer for everyone. But now we see it's about so much more than airplanes. It's about giving people the tools they need to succeed." Months passed, and the siblings' lives continued to evolve in ways they never imagined. What started as a painful experience on a plane had transformed into a movement that touched countless lives. The foundation their dad launched became a beacon of hope for many, growing faster than anyone anticipated. It wasn't just about fighting discrimination anymore. It was about building bridges, fostering understanding, and creating opportunities for those who had been overlooked. One of the most exciting developments came when the foundation partnered with schools across the country to introduce workshops on diversity and inclusion. These weren't your typical, boring lectures. They were interactive sessions designed to get students thinking critically about fairness and respect. The siblings loved visiting classrooms, sharing their story, and answering questions from curious kids. "Did you ever feel scared?" one student asked during a Q&A session at an elementary school. The sister smiled warmly. "All the time," she admitted. "But sometimes being scared is okay, because it means you're stepping out of your comfort zone. And that's where real change happens." Her brother chimed in, holding up his hand. "Think about it like this: if no one stands up, nothing changes. But if even one person speaks up, others might follow." The kids nodded, wide-eyed, soaking in every word. By the end of the session, several students raised their hands, eager to share how they plan to stand up against unfairness in their own lives. One boy promised to stick up for a classmate who got teased for his accent. Another girl vowed to speak out if she saw someone being treated unfairly at recess. Seeing these young faces light up with determination filled the siblings with pride. They weren't just planting seeds, they were nurturing them. At home, life remained busy but fulfilling. Their parents encouraged them to take breaks whenever they needed, reminding them that burnout wouldn't help anyone. "It's a marathon, not a sprint," their dad often said. So they made sure to carve out time for fun, movie nights, family dinners, and weekend trips to the park. Their grandparents joined in too, always ready with stories, jokes, or homemade treats to keep spirits high. Even so, there were moments when the weight of everything felt overwhelming. Late one night, after a particularly long day of interviews and meetings, the sister sat on the edge of her bed staring at her phone. Notifications kept rolling in, messages from supporters, updates on projects, and reminders about upcoming events. She sighed, setting the device aside. Her brother knocked, softly before peeking his head in. "You okay?" She shrugged, hugging her knees to her chest. "I don't know, sometimes it feels like we're doing all this work, but will it really last? What if people forget?" He sat down beside her, nudging her shoulder playfully. "Hey, remember what Dad said? Change starts small, but it grows over time. We're not doing this for quick fixes, we're laying the groundwork for something bigger." She looked at him, her lips curving into a faint smile. Yeah, I guess you're right. And besides, he added with a grin, we've got each other. No matter what happens, we'll figure it out together. As the months rolled on, the impact of their efforts became undeniable. Airlines around the world began adopting similar reforms, inspired by the transparency and accountability measures implemented by their dad's company. Passengers reported feeling safer and more respected during their travels. Social media buzzed with positive stories, flight attendants going above and beyond to assist nervous flyers, gate agents ensuring everyone felt welcome, and pilots taking extra steps to connect with passengers. One viral video showed a flight attendant kneeling beside a child who was afraid of flying, patiently explaining how planes worked until the little boy's tears turned into giggles. In the comments section, users praised the crew member, tagging the airline and thanking them for setting such a high standard. Another post featured a passenger recounting how a gate agent helped reunite her with her lost wallet, adding, "This is why I'll always fly with you guys." For the siblings, reading these testimonials was incredibly rewarding. It reminded them why they'd chosen to fight, not for revenge or recognition, but to make travel a better experience for everyone. Still, they knew there was more work to be done. Discrimination wasn't confined to airplanes, it existed everywhere. That realization fueled their desire to expand their mission beyond the skies. Their dad proposed hosting a global summit aimed at addressing racial bias in various industries, not just travel, but also hospitality, education, and technology. The idea excited the siblings, who immediately began brainstorming ways to involve young voices in the discussions. "We should invite students to lead panels," the sister suggested during one planning session. "They're the ones living through this stuff every day. Who better to talk about solutions?" Her brother agreed, adding, "And let's make sure there's space for art and music too. Not everything has to be speeches and presentations." By the time the summit arrived, the entire family pitched in to make it unforgettable. Held in a sprawling convention center, the event drew thousands of attendees from all walks of life. Panels featured experts alongside everyday people sharing their experiences, while breakout sessions allowed participants to brainstorm actionable steps for change. In one corner of the venue, a group of teens performed spoken word poetry about overcoming prejudice. Nearby, artists showcased murals celebrating unity and resilience. When the siblings took the stage to close out the summit, the crowd gave them a standing ovation before they even spoke. The brother grinned, raising his hands to quiet everyone down. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "This is incredible. Look at all of you, people from different backgrounds, industries, and generations coming together for the same goal. That's powerful." His sister stepped forward, her voice steady and heartfelt. "We didn't start this journey alone, and we won't finish it alone either. It's going to take all of us, working together, learning from each other, and refusing to settle for less than equality." As they left the stage arm in arm, surrounded by cheers and applause, they realized something profound. They weren't just part of a movement. They were helping build a legacy rooted in courage, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserves to belong, and deep down they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. As the years rolled on, the siblings grew older, wiser, and more determined than ever. What had started as a painful incident on a plane turned into a lifelong commitment, not just for them, but for their entire family. The foundation their dad launched became a household name, synonymous with progress and equality. It wasn't just about fighting discrimination anymore. It was about creating a world where everyone felt seen, valued, and respected. Their journey took them to places they never imagined. From speaking at international conferences to meeting presidents and activists, they found themselves in rooms filled with some of the most influential people on the planet. But no matter how big the stage or how bright the spotlight, they stayed true to who they were. Two ordinary kids who believed in doing extraordinary things. One summer, the siblings returned to the same airport where their story had begun. This time, they weren't nervous teens boarding a flight. They were honored guests invited to unveil a new mural commissioned by the airline. The artwork stretched across an entire wall near the terminal entrance, vibrant colors depicting diverse faces smiling, holding hands, and reaching toward the sky. At the center was a quote that had become their mantra: "Respect knows no boundaries." Standing in front of a cheering crowd, the brother couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. "This mural isn't just art," he said, his voice steady and strong. "It's a promise to keep pushing forward, even when it's hard, a promise to listen, learn, and grow, and most importantly, a promise to never stop believing in a better future." His sister stepped up beside him, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "When we started this journey, we didn't know what would happen. All we knew was that something had to change. Today, standing here with all of you, I see proof that change is possible. Together, we've shown the world what happens when we stand up for what's right." The applause was thunderous, echoing through the terminal like a wave of hope. Afterward, passengers stopped to take pictures with the mural, many sharing stories of how the siblings' advocacy had touched their lives. One elderly woman approached them, tears in her eyes. "I used to dread flying because of how I was treated," she admitted. "But now, every time I walk through this airport, I feel like I belong. Thank you for making that possible." Back home, life continued to evolve. The siblings finished high school, excelling not only academically but also as leaders in their community. Their parents encouraged them to pursue whatever paths made them happy, reminding them that success came in many forms. The brother decided to study engineering, inspired by the pilots and mechanics he'd met along the way. The sister chose journalism, eager to amplify voices that often went unheard. Their dad remained a guiding force, always ready with advice or encouragement. "You've already changed the world," he told them one evening over dinner. "Now go out there and find your own corners of it to shape." Even their grandparents stayed involved, attending events and offering wisdom whenever needed. "You two have taught us all something important," their grandma said to her